Today we're going to paint up a legionary of the Black Brethren of Ayreas. Now before even starting the build, we have a choice to make. Either we can paint him up like this, a slightly different Black Legion scheme, pretty cool, but I'd like something more unique. Alternatively, we can take a look at the pages of the 4th edition Codex where we can find this. That right there is total peak. Originally, idea was to use a body taken from Mark VI tactical kit and clean up the harness detail on the chest plate. But the scale of these is a bit off compared to normal CSM, and I'm not the one to accept few millimeter difference. So instead of that, I've printed up a clean, simple body and legs for the Mark IVs. Here's the rest of the bits, all from Legionaries besides a shoulder pad from the aforementioned Mark VI kit. And of course, I had to print a fitting helmet. I've dry-fitted parts together with poster putty, and he was looking a bit bare, so I've added pouches from some Primaris kit to add some interest to otherwise monotone surface. I've came up with a way of painting this scheme that doesn't require subjecting ourselves to soul-wrenching hours of symmetrical freehanding. Dare I say, it's almost fit for an army painting, although a whole bunch of dudes painted exactly like this wouldn't look any good, I figure. But for like a squad leader or a character here and there, in a Black Legion force would work great. Next, select parts of the armor were covered with gold. This was applied in 3 thin coats to get opaque coverage. Silver primer would be real handy here, but as I don't have one, black it is. I know that it looks terrible now, but believe me, there is method in the madness. And there we go. With that out of the way, I can bust out my secret weapon, Tamiya masking tape that is whole 1 millimeter in width. This is a perfect size to recreate that pattern in scale, and so freehanding hell turns into sit and stare. Basically, only thing to have in mind is keeping the angle of arms equal and leaving some space for the next step. For cutting out points of the star, I had to use wider tape. I've measured these to be 1.4 millimeter wide at the base and then eyeballed rest of the cuts. Just to be safe, I've painted on a tiny amount of masking fluid to ensure that connections were free of any gaps. Back to the airbrush with some Doom Death Black. When painting around the tape, I'm spraying from the top, real thin and slow. This way I avoid creating raised edges along the pattern. All right, it's the moment of truth. God damn, it's looking good. Next up, I used reddish brown to paint the leather parts. So, handy-dandy storage bits, belt, and the wrappings on the haft of the axe. I've also used this color to base coat the trim. This should make gold cover a little better later. For the horns, I've decided to try something new for me. I will attempt blending. With base coat down, I took some Rodent gray, and then with tiny amount of heavily diluted paint, I started going from halfway point towards the top, going slightly higher with each pass until I've ended up with a decent blend. This looks much better than just slopping on wash, although I probably should have went a little bit darker. I finished blocking out colors with metallics. Few pieces of trim and skulls got the same gold as the star, and silver was treated with my usual gunmetal from AK. I've darkened recesses of these colors with thin black wash and proceeded to highlights. I've started with a biggest hurdle, that being black armor. Here I've went along all the edges with 50-50 mix of our base black and Cold Corpse blue. I really like bluish highlights on black, gives it that cold metallic feel. Next layer of highlight was again a mix, but this time of Cold Corpse blue with Gravestone blue. This was only applied on upper-facing surfaces, so in case of the helmet, basically everywhere. Lastly, sharpest and most vocal points of the mini were painted with pure Gravestone. And there we go, like 2 hours of drawing lines condensed to little more than 30 seconds. You're welcome. For soft joints, I've used Dungeon Stone Gray. It's really easy to touch up any mistakes here. Just thin down black paint and let it flow in space between the ridges. In order to mimic natural texture of leather, I did highlights with a scratchy motion of brush, first with boar hide, and then smaller ones with fur cloak. Let's wrap it up with metals. Mithril blade for silver, and the same color but mixed with gold for the trims. For the final step, we have eyes on helmet and axe. Because of course there are eyes growing out of his weapon, why wouldn't they? This was done with white star, which is a brilliant white by the way. And to get those vibrant glowing eyes, I applied thin Blood Angel's red. Before it started drying, I've soaked up paint from the middle. This will make it appear that eyes are brightest in the center. Next, I've washed eyes with Nuln oil. This will give a nice dark outline, making him look evil as all hell. Also, it dries with a slightly glossy finish, so it's more like a clear lens. I finished the paint job with a black pupil on the axe, and with that, I've called it done.